Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I'm Joe Gibson, and every week we read roughly a page or so for your amusement. This week we have a very special treat. We're going to read from Plan9Crunch. Plan9Crunch. Well, yeah, in any case, this has been a long time coming, so let's get started. Alright, so the pages are dated. Okay. It's April 1st now. So let's turn there. Okay, it says, "Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I am Joe Gibson, and every week we read roughly a page or so for your amusement." I think I've already said this part. Okay, that part's in there twice, both as dialogue tags for some reason. Alright, so Joe starts the video and then opens the book to this page, and then starts and then trails off, getting confused about where to pick up reading, concerned that this is not going very well. Well, that's not fair. I think I'm doing fine. Well, that's not fair. I think I'm doing fine. Joe says haltingly. Haltingly? What does that even... Oh, okay, there is a footnote here. Haltingly, in a nervous way, stopping often while you were saying or doing something. I know what haltingly means. It's, in a nervous way, stopping often while you were saying or doing something. Well, that whole rant is also on the page here, so I'll spare you reading that. Well, that whole rant is also... Sorry. Gotta skip ahead a line at this point. Joe gazed deeply into the book's awe-inspiring phrases, not merely distracted, and figuring out how to formulate the next sentence. Some nice prose there. He formulates the next sentence after repeating his prior one. I don't get to deal with this. Alright, there's going to be a scene change. That's interesting. What are we looking at? Zoom in on a dog wagging its tail. Pan over to another dog. Well, the second attacks the first, gets pushed off, and he's backing off. Is that all? What was the point of that? Well, this thing doesn't have any answers, so screw that. Yeah, okay, this was an April Fool's video. I'm not really sure how you guys are going to take to it. Gamera versus Jesus Christ is a hard video to live up to. So in case none of this skit was up to the point worked for you, let's pivot to something truly unexpected. The very spirit of surprise, April Fool's subversion. I'm more ranting and rambling about Scream 7 in a video not advertised to be about such. I am not kidding, by the way, so if you have not watched that film yet and do not want spoilers, click off the video now. This still counts as an April Fool's subversion, so just indulge me. Okay, so the more I think about the film, there are some things in there that just don't work functionally. And some things that could have worked if there's more focus on them. In fact, there are 3 movies in there, battling for dominance, and resulting in a product with no real through line. The ultimate killer reveal, once you subtract the 2 superfluous ghost faces that each had one scene, is that Sydney's neighbor Jessica Bowden, played by Anna Camp, has an insane parasocial relationship with Sydney, due to our heroine's book Out of Darkness. Misunderstanding what Sydney's experience was, Jessica killed her own abusive husband, seeming to think that Sydney existed to kill the bad guys. When Sydney sat out Scream 6's New York attack, Jessica snapped and started to enact a plan to turn Sydney's daughter Tatum into the new Sydney by killing Sydney in front of her. And somewhere, somehow, in that plan, an AI reconstruction of Stu Macher and the other killers traumatizing Sydney was somehow important. That's already a big misspeak. The motive and the means have nothing to do with each other. The opportunity doesn't work either. Because the other ghost face that makes to Act 3, Marco, he takes credit for this to AI, saying he helped work on the Google AI training. But he's been working at Fallbrook Mental Institution since the 90s. I don't think they're going to take him into the... Okay. Let's add back in the fact that for Jessica's plan to work, Tatum would have to kill her. Your Model 96 Sydney Prescott is faulty because she sat out killing ghost faces one time. Yeah, you'd better dress up as Ghostface in front of the new Model 26 Tatum Evans and directly give her a reason to kill you. The apologetic so far seems to be that she's just crazy. And look, I don't even have a problem with that. I don't have an issue with Jessica in the reveal. It's the AI stuff in the movie that distracts from her and destroys any kind of possibility for a through line that she had. So, okay, yeah, the AI ostensibly exists in this film to comment on AI use in general and within filmmaking and movie making specifically. It certainly features demonstrations of AI use for anonymity in death threats, doxing, and to traumatize victims, and we have multiple characters that use AI, but we never get any sense for why they like it or what they would use it for outside of Stu. That is partially because it doesn't fit into the motive of one of the ghost faces or the career timeline for the other two. But a very popular fan theory for this movie before it came out was that it would have been about an AI-obsessed cult of students using AI to recreate Stu, who they look up to for some reason. Though predictable, there is a movie's worth of through line there. In a darkly comedic sense, I can imagine a scene where one of the kids in this cast kills their teacher for banning AI use on assignments, or where one of the kids is trying to use AI to write a stab fanfic, or a scene where a Ghostface gets killed in combat because of the AI overview of Sidney Prescott's strengths and weaknesses hallucinated a fear of snakes or something. Stu doesn't have to be in there for this to work, but if he were going to be there, if the film were going to tell us that Stu coming back is the one thing that would get Sidney on edge, then make Ben evocative of Stu and not Billy, for God's sake. Okay, backtracking for a second, Ben is Tatum's boyfriend in the film, and he's a red herring because he sneaks in through Tatum's window like Billy did for Sidney's in the original Scream. Sidney doesn't really trust him because he reminds her of Billy, but it would make more sense in the movie teasing Stu's return to have him remind her of Stu. In case you don't remember, Stu was the original Tatum's boyfriend, and despite Tatum having mostly good instincts, she stayed with Stu, who was casually psychopathic, sexist, and condescending. Sidney trying to save another Tatum from that kind of guy would add to this, reliving the past trauma that the film is trying to convince me the film was about. I like Ben, actually, and I am not pleased with the idea of making him a killer that dies. The way he exists in the finished Scream 7 Sans abrupt death scene would have made him a very interesting survivor to follow, because I can see him being a ghost face down the road, and ever since Caught and Weary in Scream 2, there's never really been a returning character that's not a good person, and could have been the ghost face of the movie. It would really help the tension in sequels if red herring scumbags could survive a film. Anyway, if we're specifically doing the version of this that is the AI Scream film where Sidney is tormented with memories of the past, it can't just be Stu, for God's sake. The film realizes it and has Roman, Mrs. Loomis, and Dewey all back to back. But that is not really enough either. There should have been messages calling back to the deaths of Sidney's previous best friends if this was going to be a film about how she's not trusted one fully since Tatum, and will be betrayed by her current one, Jessica. There's something really interesting at the heart of Jessica's motive that I will get into in a moment, but all of this, alongside the reintroduction of Gale and the Meeks Martins twins, turns this into yet a different movie, where the ultimate moral of the story and lesson for Sidney is that she should have been in Scream 6. That's insulting because the reason she wasn't was a pay dispute. I like the reconciliation of Gale and Sidney here. Throughout these films, they've had a really interesting dynamic. Sidney punches her out in the first two films, has an awkward recognition of her in the third, hugs her, and then hugs Dewey far more enthusiastically in the fourth, and then in the fifth they both lose Dewey and have to come together. A nice coda where Sidney acknowledges that she's the most trustworthy friend she still has, that helps the relationship, but it's not really enough to ground to film in. Sidney reuniting with Gale and the twins should have been a different sequel than the Jessica betrayal, which already should be a different film than the AI stuff. Because here's what this film looks like if you focus on making Jessica's motive fit throughout the film. It becomes a story interrogating Sidney's approach to helping people. Her story began because of her mother's secrets, but as she grew into the best final girl of all time, she worked on a domestic abuse helpline and then tirelessly worked to help multiple generations of people overcome Ghostface. Her book is supposed to reflect her personal journey out of darkness that she uses to help people. I said in a video leading up to Scream 7 that Sidney as a mother is the most important story Scream could tell at this point based on this trajectory. And that's because it would tie everything together to see how she differently raised her daughter than Maureen raised her. And yet she's still keeping secrets from her daughter, has prepared her for the possible reckoning, and has tried to leave everything behind. Her job in Scream 3 was helping people through abuse because she's genuinely that kind of person. And now she runs a coffee shop. It's not even important to the story that she runs a coffee shop, she just does. Now Jessica is someone that Sidney actually helped, but not in the way that she intended. This would challenge Sidney in all the ways she's different than her mother, and if she is truly doing the right by Tatum and the next generation. First of all, Jessica should be the woman we heard Sidney comforting on the crisis line in Scream 3, or at the very least, the film should connect these ideas by having Jessica have called that number before. The marketing said everything was leading to this. Make it that way, and make it that way in a way we don't expect. Next, we gotta have Jessica and Sidney share as much screen time as possible. And that is where Gale cannot be in this movie. Sydney and Jessica have to investigate together. The way that Sydney's previous best friend characters, Tatum and Hallie, even Rebecca to an extent, stuck by her in the movies. Now, in lieu of Stu, since he really does not work for the story, we can have the ghost faces try to frame Jessica's abusive husband with the same reveal that she already killed him and whatever. This can take them back to the Fallbrook institution, where if we're keeping Marco, we can have Marco and Jessica interact, and even though Marco's not in the movie for the rest of the film, there's that moment, a glimmer of recognition between him and Jessica that we'd hone in on as a clue. Anyway, Tatum also probably needs to tag along more than she actually does, and in this version of the story, we shouldn't have a secretive, controlling Sydney that hasn't trained Tatum for this, but an empathetic, authoritative version of Sydney of what she thinks the ideal mother is, so that when that does not immediately work, we can sit with that disappointment as she questions herself. I don't think that this movie necessarily interrogated Sydney's motherhood as well as it should have. We had the low-stakes scenes of her arguing with Tatum, and then the higher-stakes scenes of her thinking Tatum might die, but not the scenes where she was failing to lead Tatum through the Ghostface encounter. Let's see. This is a big rant, I'm sorry about that, but I think part of the reason why the film does not work for me is it's trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none, and the strongest element of its Ghostface was relegated to an exposition dump instead of being the threat to Sydney's parenting style that it should have been in the film. But let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. We'll have more, and we'll try to have something for every April Fool's, though if it falls on a Wednesday and not a Monday, that's going to kind of complicate what the video can be into this format. Anyway, we have all sorts of videos on the page. We have a Facebook page. We advertise stuff from here, and we also post from our blog, Plan9Crunch.com. Look into those as you wish. Thank you all for watching. That's a wrap.